Awaken your spirit, chosen ones. The moment your answer ends the conversation, people stop wondering if you're smart and start wondering what you are. That's the quiet line most people never hear, but they feel it. Because there's a strange point where intelligence stops being admired and starts being inspected. Where clarity becomes so sharp it feels suspicious. You give a solution and instead of applause, there's silence. Not the awkward kind, the recalculating kind. The kind where someone leans back, squints, and mentally runs diagnostics on you, like you just solved a puzzle they didn't even know had a second layer. Here's a real fact that makes this even more uncomfortable. Studies on human decision-making show that people trust confident answers less when they arrive too quickly. Speed breaks the illusion of effort. We expect struggle to precede insight. So when your solutions land clean, structured, and finished, no hesitation, no emotional padding, it triggers the same reaction as a magic trick done too well. The brain doesn't clap, it checks for wires, and that's where the joke sneaks in. Humans don't fear being wrong nearly as much as they fear being outpaced. If you struggle loudly, you're relatable. If you explain gently, you're wise. But if you deliver precision without sweat, suddenly you're built different from the future, or, let's be honest, probably AI. Not because you're wrong, but because you skipped the part where everyone else is still lost. This isn't about arrogance. It's about what happens when your thinking removes excuses. When your logic doesn't give people room to argue, reinterpret, or emotionally escape. Precision has a funny side effect. It puts responsibility back on the listener. And responsibility is heavy, so instead of lifting it, people label the weight. By the end of this, you'll understand why perfectly accurate solutions don't always get praise, why clarity can feel threatening, and why being precise in a noisy world makes others question your origin story, while you're just standing there, quietly wondering why solving the problem made everyone uncomfortable. Number 1. Your answers remove uncertainty instead of decorating it. Most people don't actually want clarity. They want comfort wrapped in smart-sounding words. So when a problem shows up, the usual response is to talk around it, soften it, add layers, and leave just enough fog so no one feels exposed. That fog becomes social currency. It makes everyone feel involved, thoughtful, and safe. But when your answer cuts straight through the noise and leaves nothing floating, the room changes. There's nothing left to debate, reinterpret, or emotionally cushion. The uncertainty is gone, and so is the excuse to stay confused. This is why precise answers feel heavier than clever ones. Clever answers entertain uncertainty. Precise answers end it. Once the truth is clean and visible, people can't hide behind misunderstandings or different perspectives. The problem either gets solved or it doesn't. And that moment is uncomfortable because clarity silently demands action. It doesn't raise its voice, but it removes all the hiding places. That's also why people don't always respond with admiration. Instead, they pause. They go quiet. Not because they disagree, but because the answer landed too cleanly. Their mind expected effort, back and forth, and struggle. What it got was resolution. Resolution feels final, and finality makes people nervous. It feels like a door closing rather than a conversation continuing. Most discussions survive by staying open-ended. Your answers don't. They collapse the discussion into a conclusion. And when there's no room left to talk, people start inspecting the person who spoke. If the solution was obvious in hindsight, why didn't they see it? If it works immediately, what does that say about all the time they spent circling the issue? So instead of saying, "That makes sense," they question the delivery, the speed, the tone, the source. Because it's easier to doubt the clarity than to admit the uncertainty was unnecessary all along. Removing confusion is powerful, but it comes at a cost. When uncertainty disappears, responsibility takes its place. And responsibility is the one thing most people weren't prepared to receive. Number 2. You solve the second problem, not the first one. Most people think problems are what they appear to be, but real mastery comes from seeing the layers underneath. The first problem is always obvious. The surface issue everyone talks about, debates about, and complains about endlessly. Average thinkers stop there. They throw solutions at what they can see, hoping effort alone will stick. But solving only the first problem is like treating the symptom and leaving the disease unchecked. It feels productive, but it rarely changes anything meaningfully. Exceptional precision doesn't waste time on what's visible. It drills into the underlying cause, the second problem. The one nobody named, the one nobody prepared for, the one quietly shaping every failed attempt before. When you address that hidden issue, the surface problem often resolves itself naturally, faster, and in ways that surprise everyone. People think you've performed magic, but in reality, you're just seeing deeper than anyone else chose to. The second problem is invisible, because most people don't bother looking. They're too busy reacting, too invested in appearing busy, or too comforted by complexity that keeps them occupied. But once you identify it, you're no longer competing in the shallow arena. You're operating in a space where results speak louder than talk. That's why your solutions feel uncanny. You're not just fixing what's broken. You're preemptively solving the consequence that hasn't even arrived yet. This ability makes people uncomfortable because it breaks their mental scripts. They've rehearsed arguments, anticipated obstacles, and mentally mapped out what solving the problem should look like. Then you come along and cut straight to the root without ceremony, and suddenly their carefully structured expectations collapse. They don't recognize the approach, so they doubt it. Solving the second problem isn't about being smarter. It's about being deeper, quieter, and more patient in thought. It's about noticing patterns, consequences, and hidden dependencies that the obvious thinker will never see. That's why your solutions feel beyond normal human reasoning. The first problem can be solved by anyone willing to try, but the second problem only yields to the mind that refuses to be distracted by appearances. And that refusal is what makes your intelligence feel almost impossible to comprehend. Number 3. Your logic leaves no emotional escape route. Most people think intelligence is measured by how clever or convincing an answer sounds. That's only half of it. The other half, the part that makes people uncomfortable, is when logic becomes undeniable. When every step, every connection, every conclusion lines up so perfectly that there's no room left for excuses, reinterpretation, or emotional sidestepping. That's when clarity stops being a gift and starts feeling like a silent challenge. People don't resist truth itself. They resist the idea that the truth leaves them nowhere to hide. Emotional escape is what most communication relies on. Humans cushion themselves with feelings, justifications, or distractions when facts are inconvenient. We look for wiggle room to soften reality because reality often comes with responsibility, risk, or self-reflection. When your logic removes that wiggle room, it feels like the ground under them has shifted. There's no safe corner to retreat to, no friendly compromise, no maybe or sort of, just the stark clarity of what is. That kind of precision triggers a quiet, almost involuntary reassessment of everything they thought they knew. This is why precise reasoning feels intense, almost unnerving. It doesn't scream or intimidate, it simply refuses to negotiate. People often mistake this for arrogance or unnatural intelligence, but it's just truth in its purest, uncompromising form. When every argument, counterpoint, or objection collapses under the weight of logic, the listener is forced to confront their own choices, assumptions, and inaction. That confrontation is uncomfortable because the human mind instinctively seeks loopholes, explanations, and soft landings. Removing those emotional escape routes is not cruelty, it's accountability delivered quietly but firmly. Exceptional thinking doesn't just provide answers, it reshapes the way people perceive the problem itself. And when your logic leaves no escape, it does more than solve the issue. It forces reflection, ownership, and awareness in a way that casual problem-solving never can. That is why precise intelligence doesn't just impress, it unsettles, and in that discomfort, real growth begins. Number 4. You compress years of trial and error into one sentence. Most people believe mastery is built slowly through endless trial and error, and they expect explanations to follow the same messy path. They think learning is a long, tangled story, full of mistakes, missteps, and aha moments that arrive gradually. That's comforting. It's human. But when someone delivers a solution that seems effortless, complete, and immediate, it breaks their sense of time and effort. That single sentence, that precise answer, carries the weight of countless failures and lessons learned. But the listener doesn't see the path. They only see the result, and that invisibility makes it feel impossible. This is the difference between experience and appearance. Average thinkers showcase effort. Exceptional ones compress it. They don't need to narrate every misstep because the solution already embodies all of them. It's a quiet shortcut through years of struggle, delivered so cleanly that it seems like instinct, but it's actually distilled wisdom. Every word, every choice, every pause is calculated, even if it looks casual. That kind of clarity is so unusual that people instinctively question it because they know learning normally comes with noise, hesitation, and compromise. Compressing trial and error into one sentence is not about being flashy, it's about efficiency of thought. It's the ability to hold the whole map of the problem and its solutions in your mind at once, then present only the part that matters. The rest is invisible scaffolding, silently supporting the clarity they see. This makes your intelligence feel almost alien, because humans expect struggle to be visible. Effort is proof. When effort disappears, people instinctively suspect something unnatural. The power of this approach is subtle but profound. You don't just provide answers, you provide shortcuts through experience itself. You save time, energy, and frustration, but you also challenge perception. When someone hears that one perfect line, they may applaud, but there's also a quiet disbelief. That disbelief is a signal. They just witnessed the collapse of what they believed about effort, learning, and possibility. And that's why your clarity, compressed and refined, resonates deeper than explanation ever could. Number 5. You skip steps others didn't know existed. Most people tackle problems in a straight line. They follow what seems logical step by step, often repeating the same loops because that's all they know. They assume everyone solves things the same way, and when an answer arrives cleanly, they subconsciously trace it back. But the steps don't exist in their map. That's the secret. Exceptional thinkers operate on a different plane. They skip steps that others haven't even realized were optional, invisible, or irrelevant. That's why your solutions feel sudden, almost impossible, because the process behind them isn't just shorter, it's unseen. Skipping steps isn't laziness, it's depth. It's the ability to identify what actually matters and what is distraction. Most attempts at problem-solving waste energy on irrelevant actions, testing, or confirmations that aren't necessary. You intuitively recognize the essence of the problem, isolate it, and move straight to the solution. It's like walking through a room and suddenly appearing on the other side without anyone noticing how you got there. People are left staring, retracing their own slower, noisier path, trying to make sense of your efficiency. This invisibility of process is disorienting. Humans expect struggle, hesitation, and complexity in meaningful solutions. When they don't see it, their brain searches for explanations. Maybe it's luck, maybe it's cheating, maybe it's something unnatural. That tension between expectation and reality is why precision feels alien. The skipped steps create a silent aura of mastery because you don't just solve problems. You anticipate which steps are irrelevant before they even appear. Operating this way also forces people to rethink their assumptions. They realize that the steps they've been painstakingly following might have been holding them back all along. Your ability to skip what's unnecessary doesn't just solve the problem, it rewrites the map of how problems should be solved. That's the power and the discomfort. You move faster, cleaner, and more effectively, but in doing so, you quietly expose the inefficiency of everyone else's effort. And that exposure is what makes your intelligence feel almost otherworldly. Number 6, you eliminate false hope without being cruel. Most people are experts at softening truth. They wrap inconvenient facts in comfort, half promises and vague assurances, giving hope that isn't real just to keep others calm or happy. It's a human reflex. People prefer optimism, even when it's unrealistic, because it's easier to imagine a bright outcome than to face the truth. But when your solution arrives, it doesn't sugarcoat or dramatize. It simply sets reality straight. You eliminate false hope, and you do it with a precision that doesn't hurt, but leaves no illusions behind. That clarity is shocking because it's rare. The subtle genius of this approach is in its quiet accountability. You don't cheer someone up with a lie, but you also don't crush them with negativity. You present the situation in its full weight, showing what's possible, what's realistic, and what must be acted on. People instinctively resist this because it forces them to confront responsibility. False hope allows delay, excuses, and avoidance. Reality forces decisions, and your answers silently demand that people face them. That's uncomfortable, and that's why they start analyzing you instead of the solution. Eliminating false hope isn't cruelty, it's liberation. When people finally see the truth, even if it stings, they gain a clean foundation to move forward. No wasted effort, no chasing shadows, no clinging to illusions. Your precision provides the kind of clarity that most avoid because facing it is unsettling. But the results are undeniable. Those who listen can act decisively, without hesitation or doubt. This is why your intelligence feels almost alien to others. They are used to diluted solutions that entertain, console, or confuse. You deliver what actually works, stripped of emotional padding, yet carefully measured to avoid harm. It's a rare balance. Brutal honesty with a soft touch, ruthless clarity without hostility. By removing false hope, you force people to see the landscape of their reality clearly, and that clarity, more than charm or persuasion, is what makes your insight unforgettable and your influence quietly unstoppable. Number 7, you predict outcomes people haven't emotionally reached yet. Most people respond to situations based on what they feel, not what they know. Their decisions, their warnings, their plans all come from a place of reaction. They see a problem, gauge it through their current emotions, and act accordingly. Exceptional thinkers, on the other hand, operate ahead of that curve. They don't just solve problems, they anticipate the consequences that others haven't fully grasped or emotionally accepted yet. That's why your solutions feel almost prophetic. People don't just struggle to follow your logic, they struggle to catch up emotionally. Predicting outcomes before others are ready for them requires a rare combination of clarity, insight, and patience. You see the trajectory, the hidden dominoes, the subtle patterns that will inevitably unfold. You understand that people will resist or deny what's coming simply because they aren't ready to face it internally. So your solution arrives before the rest of the room has emotionally processed the reality, leaving a sense of disbelief in its wake. It's unsettling, because humans are comfortable only when their feelings align with facts. When that alignment is off, even perfectly reasonable solutions feel unnatural. This approach quietly forces people to reconsider their assumptions. They realize that while they were still debating surface details, you had already mapped the endgame. The cognitive dissonance it creates is powerful. Your predictions feel like intuition, but they're built on precision, not guesswork. The earlier people face consequences, the faster they can act, but they often resist because it requires accepting truths they aren't ready to accept. That resistance amplifies the impression that you're operating on a different level, almost outside normal human reasoning. Operating this way shifts the balance of power without drama. You're not forcing decisions, you're illuminating inevitabilities. By predicting outcomes before people emotionally reach them, you create a quiet authority. People may not immediately appreciate it, but eventually they recognize that your insight didn't just solve the problem. It revealed the full landscape of what was to come, and that foresight, delivered with precision, is what makes your intelligence feel almost impossible to contest. Number 8. You don't optimize for approval, only for accuracy. Most people tailor their answers to fit expectations. They soften their words, add hedges, or exaggerate clarity just to be liked, to earn nods, or to avoid discomfort. Approval feels safe. It cushions the mind from criticism, disagreement, or rejection. But when your focus is purely on accuracy, approval becomes irrelevant. You aren't speaking to be liked. You're speaking to be right. That's what makes your solutions feel intense, almost alien. People instinctively search for flaws, not because your logic is wrong, but because it doesn't bend to make them comfortable. Choosing accuracy over approval is uncomfortable for both sides. For you, it demands absolute honesty, unshaken by emotion, ego, or expectation. For others, it creates friction. Humans are wired to seek validation, to measure truth by consensus rather than facts. When your answer ignores consensus and zeroes in on precision, it breaks the usual social contract. It removes excuses, challenges assumptions, and forces accountability. People may resist, dismiss, or even ridicule, not because you're inaccurate, but because you didn't soften the blow for their comfort. The brilliance of prioritizing accuracy is subtle, but powerful. You don't waste time on embellishments or compromise that dulls the solution. Every word, every step, every conclusion is chosen to reflect reality as closely as possible. That kind of clarity forces action. It leaves no room for reinterpretation or rationalization. People might bristle at first, but eventually they recognize that the solution works because it is untouchable by opinion or sentiment. When you operate this way consistently, it builds quiet authority. People may question your tone, your speed, or even your nature, but they cannot dispute the results. Accuracy has a longevity that approval never achieves. Trends fade, popularity wanes, emotions shift, but precise solutions remain correct, undeniable, and replicable. That's why your intelligence feels unsettling. You're not trying to charm the room or earn applause. You're simply stating the truth, and in doing so, you quietly force the world to adjust around it. Number 9. Your solutions work even when no one is watching. Most people perform under observation. They craft explanations, polish their reasoning, and even exaggerate effort to appear competent or impressive. Action becomes performative, designed to be seen rather than to actually solve. The moment the audience disappears, so does the effectiveness. Results vanish, and the solution loses integrity. That's the invisible line that separates average thinkers from exceptional ones. You don't rely on anyone's attention to validate your work. Your solutions function perfectly whether they're scrutinized or completely ignored. This creates a subtle, almost invisible power. People notice it without understanding why. When a solution works flawlessly in private, without guidance, applause, or oversight, it carries a weight that spectacle can't replicate. It proves mastery isn't about showmanship, it's about truth. You've internalized the problem so completely that the answer exists independently of approval, audience, or circumstance. That independence makes your intelligence feel untouchable because it doesn't seek recognition, yet it consistently delivers results. It also changes the dynamics of trust. When others see a solution succeed without anyone enforcing it, they sense reliability. The results speak louder than any argument, debate, or presentation ever could. There's no room for doubt, no wiggle room for excuses, and no opportunity for reinterpretation. What you create doesn't bend to circumstance. It simply works. That consistency, especially when no one is watching, sets a standard most people don't even realize they're measuring against. The silent beauty of this approach is that it separates action from ego. You aren't performing for praise or visibility. You solve the problem because the problem exists and it needs solving. That mindset makes your solutions rare and almost unsettling. People expect logic and effort to be messy, inconsistent, or performative. When yours aren't, they subconsciously question how it's possible. And that quiet, unwavering efficiency, that ability to act correctly without applause, is what makes your intelligence feel exceptional, reliable, and completely self-sufficient. Number 10. You see patterns where others see personality. Most people explain behavior through stories about who someone is. They point to personality traits, moods, or whims, and use them as justification for actions, decisions, and mistakes. It feels human because it gives a sense of control. If you know someone's personality, you can predict them. But this approach is limited, messy, and often wrong. Exceptional thinkers don't get trapped in stories. They see the systems, the sequences, and the invisible patterns that drive outcomes. You notice the rhythm beneath the chaos, the forces behind behavior that others mistake for randomness. That's why your understanding feels almost preternatural. When others are busy labeling people as lazy, reckless, or brilliant, you're tracing the invisible lines that connect decisions to consequences. You understand that personality explains nothing without context, and context alone rarely tells the whole story. By seeing patterns, you spot repetition, predict results, and identify leverage points that remain invisible to those fixated on traits. This allows you to act decisively, solve problems efficiently, and foresee outcomes with a clarity that feels uncomfortable to others because it bypasses the usual human shortcuts. This ability also changes how people perceive responsibility. When they see actions as products of personality, it's easy to excuse or blame. When you see the underlying pattern, excuses vanish. Success and failure stop being random or emotional. They become logical, traceable, and predictable. People instinctively resist this because it forces them to confront accountability they didn't expect. That quiet tension makes your insight feel unsettling, almost unnatural, because it sidesteps the comforting human narrative. Seeing patterns instead of personalities is more than observation. It's strategic foresight. It allows you to respond to situations not based on who people are, but on how the system operates. While others remain trapped in surface-level assumptions, you operate in a deeper space where outcomes are measurable, consequences are foreseeable, and chaos becomes manageable. That is why your intelligence feels beyond ordinary. It doesn't just interpret the world. It deciphers its underlying code, and once you do that, nothing appears random anymore. Number 11. You close loopholes before they're exploited. Most people solve problems reactively. They wait for issues to appear, deal with consequences, and then patch the gaps. That's how systems fail, relationships fracture, and strategies collapse. Exceptional thinkers operate differently. They anticipate weak points before anyone else sees them. They identify cracks in logic, gaps in planning, and vulnerabilities in behavior that haven't yet caused harm, and they neutralize them quietly, efficiently, and preemptively. This is why your solutions feel untouchable. By the time anyone notices a potential problem, it's already resolved. Closing loopholes before they're exploited requires foresight and precision. You're not guessing. You're mapping the sequence of cause and effect so accurately that the next step, the misstep, and the consequences are already accounted for. Most people can't do this because they're focused on what's visible now. They respond to the obvious, the immediate, the crises they can feel. You, however, operate in the space beyond immediate perception. You see not just what is, but what could be, and you act on that knowledge. This ability is unsettling to others because it makes your intelligence appear effortless and almost preternatural. They scramble to find weak points, expecting to exploit them, but there aren't any. Every potential problem has already been anticipated, every flaw corrected before it manifests. That's why your solutions feel complete and why your judgment is rarely questioned. People instinctively sense that what you present isn't temporary or partial. It's finished, refined, and resilient. There's also an invisible power in this approach. When loopholes are closed before anyone notices, it builds quiet authority. Others may not understand the extent of your foresight, but they feel the results. Systems hold, decisions succeed, and crises never reach fruition. That reliability creates trust, respect, and sometimes fear, because your intelligence operates beyond normal reactive thinking. You're not just solving problems, you're designing a reality where problems struggle to exist at all. And that, more than any display of skill or effort, is what sets you apart as someone whose mind functions on a level most people can't even imagine. Number 12. You give answers that age well. Most advice is temporary. It rides trends, panders to emotions, or fits only the immediate context. People celebrate it for a moment, and then it fades, replaced by the next idea, the next strategy, the next hot tip. Exceptional thinkers operate differently. Your answers aren't designed to impress in the short term. They're designed to last. They aren't flashy, they aren't performative, but they are correct, functional, and reliable regardless of how the world shifts. That's why your solutions feel timeless, almost unsettling, because most people are used to guidance that expires faster than it's received. Creating answers that age well requires a different kind of intelligence. It's not enough to solve the immediate problem. You must anticipate changes, patterns, and consequences. You must filter out what is trivial, trendy, or distracting, leaving only what actually matters. This clarity is rare because humans are often distracted by appearances and urgency. We celebrate the immediate because it feels satisfying, even if it won't hold up under scrutiny. You, however, see beyond the present, delivering solutions that retain their validity when others have moved on, questioned, or failed. This longevity in solutions also changes how people perceive your intelligence. It's one thing to offer something that works today. It's another to offer something that continues to work months, even years later, without adjustment. People notice this subtle difference, even if they don't consciously register why. It feels like foresight, patience, and depth, all combined. It commands quiet respect because it challenges the normal pace of understanding. Answers that age well also carry quiet authority. They force people to confront the gap between temporary trends and enduring truths. While others scramble to update, tweak, or discard their solutions, yours remain stable, guiding decisions without noise or revision. That stability, that consistency, is what makes your intelligence feel exceptional. It doesn't seek attention, applause, or validation. It simply exists, reliable, immutable, and far beyond the fleeting standards most people measure by. And that is why your answers are remembered long after excitement fades, quietly proving their worth. Number 13. You don't confuse complexity with depth. Most people assume that complicated explanations equal intelligence. They pile on jargon, over-explain every detail, or make problems look bigger than they are, believing that the more tangled the answer, the more impressive it seems. That's a comforting illusion for both the speaker and the listener. It hides gaps in understanding and inflates perceived skill. Exceptional thinkers don't fall for this trap. You understand that true depth is not in length or difficulty, it's in clarity, precision, and insight. You solve the essence of the problem, not the appearance of complexity, and that's what makes your intelligence feel almost unnatural. Depth is about seeing the core, stripping away noise, and identifying what actually matters. Complexity can distract, confuse, and stall people, while depth illuminates. Most solutions fail to impress in the long term because they overwhelm with detail but don't address the real leverage points. Your answers, however, operate on a different level. They are deceptively simple because they bypass everything unnecessary and go straight to the heartbeat of the problem. This simplicity isn't laziness, it's mastery. The ability to condense years of observation, learning, and experimentation into something immediately actionable. People often misinterpret this simplicity as being too easy or suspicious because it contradicts the expectation that intelligence must struggle to appear. They expect a longer, messier process because that's all they know. When they encounter an answer that cuts through in one clean line, it creates a subtle tension, admiration mixed with disbelief. Your clarity exposes the illusion that effort equals depth, showing that most attempts at problem-solving are bloated with irrelevant work. Operating this way gives you quiet authority. Your solutions are memorable, effective, and resilient because they are rooted in substance, not spectacle. You don't need to dazzle with noise or overcomplicate to be understood. People may initially resist the simplicity, but they eventually realize that what looks simple is actually profound. That is the mark of true depth. It doesn't need to impress, it just delivers, leaving everyone else scrambling to catch up while you've already solved what matters most. Number 14. Your clarity forces responsibility onto the listener. Most people speak in ways that allow others to hide behind excuses. Advice, instructions, or solutions are often padded with ambiguity, hedges, or unnecessary softness, giving people room to interpret, delay, or avoid acting. That's comfortable for everyone. It keeps responsibility diffuse and blame manageable. Exceptional thinkers, however, operate differently. Your clarity doesn't leave space for avoidance. Every word, every step, every conclusion is precise, leaving no ambiguity. When people hear your solution, they are faced not with an opinion to consider, but with a truth that demands action. That kind of clarity is rare, and it can be unsettling because it removes excuses. Forcing responsibility doesn't mean being harsh or confrontational. It means delivering insight that aligns completely with reality in a way that makes the next steps unmistakable. People instinctively resist this because it creates tension. They realize that inaction is no longer a safe option, that the truth doesn't wait for comfort or hesitation. When your solution lands, it silently says, "The next move is yours," and there is no ambiguity about what must be done. That quiet accountability is powerful because it shifts the burden from theory to practice, from abstract understanding to tangible execution. This is why people often pause after hearing your answer. It's not disbelief in logic, it's a realization that responsibility has landed squarely on them. Most advice allows people to nod, acknowledge, and continue as before. Your clarity doesn't allow that. It illuminates exactly what needs to happen, stripping away doubt, delay, and diversion. People may initially feel exposed or challenged, but that discomfort is the catalyst for growth. The brilliance of this approach is subtle but transformative. By removing ambiguity, you empower people to act decisively. Your intelligence isn't measured by how impressive your answer sounds. It's measured by how inescapable its implications are. When clarity forces responsibility, it doesn't just solve a problem. It changes behavior, shapes decisions, and realigns priorities. That is why your insight feels exceptional. It doesn't just answer questions. It quietly demands that the listener rise to the level of the solution itself. In the end, what sets exceptional intelligence apart isn't just knowing more. It's seeing differently, acting decisively, and delivering clarity that others can barely comprehend. It's about solving the problems people don't even realize exist, predicting outcomes they haven't emotionally reached, and eliminating false hope without cruelty. It's about compressing years of trial and error into a single, precise statement, closing loopholes before they're ever noticed, and providing solutions that stand the test of time. It's about moving beyond personality to patterns, skipping invisible steps, and refusing to trade accuracy for approval. True mastery lies in this quiet, relentless precision. It doesn't seek applause, it doesn't perform for the crowd, and it doesn't hide behind complexity. It operates in silence, in a way that forces responsibility, anticipates consequences, and illuminates the invisible architecture of reality. That is why exceptional intelligence doesn't just solve problems. It transforms the way people think, act, and measure what is possible. Every point we've explored today, every subtle pattern and principle, points to one undeniable truth. Extraordinary minds don't simply react. They anticipate, refine, and shape outcomes with a precision that almost feels unnatural. And while that clarity can unsettle, challenge, or even intimidate, it is also what creates lasting impact. If you found this insight valuable, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button to stay updated with more powerful perspectives. Like this video if it challenged your thinking, comment your thoughts to join the conversation, and share it with someone who needs to see this today. Mastery, after all, grows when it's applied, and now you have the tools to begin. Stay awakened, chosen ones.